Well, hello, everyone. I'm Reverend Karla. Welcome to Spirituality Matters. Now I invite you to settle in and let's find that sacred space between here where I am and there where you are. And let us be reminded that the Holy transcends our physical bodies and our time together is just as meaningful and sacred as if we were sitting beside one another. And so it is. And okay, let's get started. Oh, my friends, I am so excited about my wonderful guest. And I should say, by the way, if you notice this camera here, I'm sitting in a virtual classroom and the little dog that's decided to give us some background music is a grand dog. So we'll just have to, I take my podcasting studio with me wherever my life takes me. So please bear with me as we have some interruptions. But back to my wonderful guest, Sophia Spallino, the host and the founder of the Enlightened podcast, as well as a digital, and I'm going to add life coach, because I see so much of your work on TikTok and Instagram that is changing lives. And I know that that is something that I'm holding space for, because I read the comments of people of what they're saying when you share your story. So Goddess, thank you so much for giving us your time and energy here today.
Oh, thank you. You got me sweating. I'm going hot and cold today. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. You have no idea how happy I am to be on your show or just get to talk with you. You're one of my favorite people on the internet, and you've become just like an internet mom that's said all the things to me and so many other people that we've wanted to hear from your generation in our lives when we didn't feel accepted or seen, and you make us all feel seen. So thank you.
You are so welcome. I'm not sure about the dog. I might have to pause this. I don't know what's going on here. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program here after our little doggy interruption. All right, Sophia, I just want to jump right into it. You have such a marvelous story, and I know so many of both of our followers are going to enjoy this space where you can just expand a little bit more into it and share your story. So I'm just going to open up the mic and allow you to start with where you came from and how it brought you to where you are today.
Absolutely. Well, I am 29 years old today, but I was born in South Louisiana, so very Southern, very Christian, very Republican community. And I was brought up going to political rallies for things that I didn't have any say in, and I was told to believe in. I started going to a very charismatic church when I was really little, and I was slain in the spirit and encouraged to speak in tongues. And it was a lot of pressure to be this good Christian girl since I was really little. And I always felt my dad and my mom even would tell me, sadly, they'd say things like, "Oh, you just have to be good at English and spelling. You don't have to worry about math or science. You're a girl, like you don't have to be good at those things. You're going to college to get your MRS degree, like get married." Like that was what I was told my whole life. And so charismatic church, I was actually pulled out of school in fourth grade because I was bullied, which I thought my parents were so amazing for pulling me out, but it was so much more than that. They didn't want us to be like the world. So they decided to keep us inside and homeschooled. And from that day, I pretty much ended up being best friends with my sisters. And I was really grateful to have homeschool teachers. We were very privileged in that way that I had it still a good education by someone who was getting their master's degree in college that my mom would hire. So it wasn't as bad as I think some people's homeschool experiences might have been. And I'm not knocking homeschooling for everyone, but it was isolating for sure. And I felt like I missed out on a lot of normal social interactions. Another crazy thing that I'd hear my parents say is, "Oh, like we'll homeschool you, but we couldn't send you to an all-girls school because you'll end up gay. You'll just be a lesbian if we send you to an all-girls school. So we're going to homeschool you to keep you away from boys and sin," that sort of thing. So jokes on them.
I want to pause for something. You just for our followers who might not know what this is, because I've had this question before. You
Yeah.
mentioned slain in the spirit.
Mm.
At what age did you have that experience?
You know, it's something that I've always known. So I grew up in nursery school. And then I remember my parents would pull me out of nursery school and be like, oh, today, like you're learning about big church, like you're going to big people church, and would try to be like, you're better than the other kids in this way, where like you're ready for this, I guess. And it was like, I love my parents. They had great intentions and like we've done a lot of healing, but it was kind of crazy to think that you're putting a kid in that environment with a lot of yelling and jumping over chairs. And I
Yeah.
remember my parents saying, and I don't remember this so much because I was really little when they were heavily involved in this kind of church, but they would say that church would last from like 8 in the morning till at least like 3 or 4, and they would take a little lunch break and then go back to it. And that's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
So I remember being there, but yeah, that's about it. And I remember,
Okay.
falling down and then like laying things on you and watching other people get like yelled at and pretty much spit
Hmm.
on from the
Hmm.
forcefulness and laying down and then laying sheets over them because of course you couldn't be improper as a woman, uh, and not have a sheet on top of you to cover
Yes.
you up.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And so it's a very much a like a physical out a display of what's supposed to be happening
Inside.
on the inside. And I think, yeah, and I think based on my experience, I saw a lot of animation around that where some of
Mm,
it may have been authentic, but a lot of it seemed to be part of just playing a role that was inside
mm,
that. So I don't want to judge it, but at the same time, I do think it was also it was used a lot of times to manipulate people, because if you
mm.
didn't have that power that people were displaying, then you were doing something wrong or
I
something like that.
absolutely agree. I felt so much pressure to be able to be like so essentially like enlightened that you'd be slain in the spirit. But I will say that now, being outside of the Christian church and just being a spiritual person, you still see people performing. I just think people are way more honest about the performance. So we talk when we go into a yoga class now, and we could be like, okay, so how much of that time we're in our heads, caring about what other people thought of the poses rather than being in our hearts. So
Oh,
it's
that's
this
so
open
good.
conversation where people are okay to be vulnerable, where I felt like in that space, at least in that time back in the early 90s when I was a kid, there wasn't those types of conversations. It was an
Hmm.
expectation that you can immediately get there. And now on the outside looking in, I'm like, maybe some people really were there because I believe you can essentially induce yourself into a spiritual high. I can do that with breath work.
Yep.
You might have been breathing so crazy from dancing around the room that you put yourself into a state, and that's possible, but it's not just because of mystical God
Yeah.
throwing you down.
Very good. Okay. So if anybody else has any questions about the slain in the spirit, we'll be happy to answer them, because we'll give you Sophia's contact information at the end. So please continue with your story.
I'm not an expert in it. I just remember being traumatized by
I
it.
well, that's good that to know that, because I think it's important that you don't have to be an expert. Nobody is.
Mm,
What was your perspective of it is what I think is so fascinating,
yeah,
because I certainly had mine as well that was very similar to yours. So,
really.
yeah.
Yeah, and then one thing that this conversation brought me to, I didn't even realize I would talk about, is I went to a middle school or high school church camp. Of course, everyone does it. It's like the cool thing to do. And of course, there's that last night where they've emotionally manipulated the children enough to really believe that you have to leave, change. You cannot have any sexual thoughts. You're not going to want to think about kissing your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whatever. And I remember thinking, I've got to be able to speak in tongues by the end of this. Like they said, you're going to receive your spiritual gifts by the end of this. And at this point, my parents had transferred to a very cool church, quote unquote. It was non-denominational. It was not noted as a charismatic church. And people were somewhat calm. We sang songs like Shout to the Lord. Those,
Yes.
yes, pretty normal,
Yeah.
non-denominational church, right? And we thought that, and my parents even thought, wow, like we were manipulated in the past. And like, this is what actual church is. There doesn't have to be, you don't have to be there all day. You don't have to volunteer all day. This is just more normal. But in reality, there were still things that weren't really healthy about that either. So everyone who's been through this experience knows that camp is extremely emotionally manipulative. And if you haven't, you're out in the sun all day, you're playing games as a group, you're building these friendships, but there's a lot of pressure to be extremely vulnerable and reveal so much about anything you think could possibly be a sin. And so much of the time, your sexuality or desire for sex becomes an idol because that's what they focus on your sin being. And as a 11-year-old or to 14-year-old, that might not even be on your radar. And I feel like they're pushing it there. And so you're getting to know all these people and your leaders, and you're required to be vulnerable with your leaders. And so at the end of this, my leader knew I didn't have the gift of tongues yet. And tongues is whenever you're gifted with a divine secret language between you and God, which
Very good,
I'm not.
very good explanation.
I'm like, that's all I can do to explain it. But I'm not saying I don't think it exists, or that someone could put themselves into their self in a meditative state by repeating syllables over and over. And like right now, I'm really passionate about studying green Terra, and there's these syllables that go together, and I don't know what they mean, but I appreciate that language, and I research each little syllable. I'm like, okay, if I could focus on this syllable, I can breathe in, peace, exhale any division in my life, breathe in oneness. See, I'm focusing on something. So I do believe that in Christianity, you can choose whatever you want anything to mean, and you could focus, and you could really have a word that brings you peace, and you repeat it over and over again. But this is like pig Latin for those of you who have never heard it before. And I was expected to come up with something. And I just remember the pressure being so strong. And at the end of this night, where the music was loud, the lights were on, the smoke machines were on, and all these kids with their hands in the air surrendered to the Lord and crying their eyes out, I remember my leader coming up to me and being like, "You just did it." And I was like, "Did what? I've been sitting here focused saying it's not coming out." And like, she made me believe that I had actually done it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because to this day, I can go back and be like, there's no way. There's no way. But that day I went home, or the next day I went home, and I remember laying on my room floor, just staring up at the ceiling fan and being like, okay, if I stay here long enough and ask God hard enough, maybe he'll come back. Like maybe I did do it. And that was the first time I can look back and think, okay, I manipulated myself into believing that I could do this magical gift thing. And looking back, I think I just had 4 syllables that I repeat over and over, and I don't know where they came from. I invented them in my head because that's what I felt I had to do, and I tried to give it some meaning, but I'll never know what I was doing. And so for
Yeah.
those of you listening, I'm curious because this is something I've never talked about before on my platform. Did you invent tongues in your head, or what was your experience with that? Did you?
Well, actually, I did have a very mystical experience with tongues. It was something that I did experience as a gift. And I remember the
Wow.
day I get a lot of answers and a lot of spiritual guidance when I'm at close to water. So I was at the beach and I wasn't even thinking about it. And on my way back, I felt something welling up inside me. And it
Oh, wow.
felt like this gibberish started to come out, and I knew it was some kind of, I was invoking some kind of sacred language that I didn't understand, but I also knew that it was in partnership with something else. So therefore, a time it served me that I could actually hear someone. I'm probably going to freak some people out here, but
No.
I'll share more about it, because when I could hear people speak in tongues and I could understand what they were saying.
Whoa. Okay.
I could understand it. And I actually, I was able to use that gift, but I would not use it in the way that I was being asked to use it in church leadership as part of in my leadership role.
Mhm.
It was something I felt I felt it was very sacred, that invoked a sacred experience with the divine and the heavenly angelic spirit guide realm, that really had, I did not see it as a way to invoke proclamations from the other side. I felt it was more about a way that we were just opening our we were connected to spirit.
Yeah.
And I liken it to in the Tibetan traditions, there is the same kind of chanting that can occur from going into a higher level of chanting the Om or chanting one of theirs. And you can go into this place of what they call gibberish, which is so ecstatic state that it's very, very rarely reached, but it can be reached. And they say take it very seriously if that's what you're trying to attain. And if you read Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Eat, Pray, Love, when she was meditating and felt herself rise above herself, I see that in the same realm. I see all of that. So it's not just something, it's not a gift that's just part of Christianity. I believe it's a gift. It's an interfaith, inner spiritual experience that's available to us all, but it comes to us in different channels.
Yes.
Now, since I've left Christianity, I don't utilize the gift. I don't feel like it was something that I benefited from.
Right.
And so I don't use it. I've not desired it. There are other ways that I feel I'm connected to spirit, and in the soul work that I do, that I receive guidance in my other practices. So I think for that, and because I saw it manipulated so much, I do think, like, for instance, I don't believe that in that experience that you had is what you just shared is the exact perfect example of why those kinds of gifts should not be demanded in that kind of setting.
Yeah.
Joyce,
Especially from a kid.
Oh yeah. Joyce Meyer would do the same thing in her conferences. And all of a sudden the whole stadium would be filled and there would be people standing around like, what is happening? Well, that's just that a lot of it becomes more about show than anything else. But what we're looking for is that divine inner spiritual connection that feeds your soul, and that shows up in different ways for all of us. So now, like when I was being inner spiritual care with someone, I would receive questions. So if you and I are in spiritual care and you're seeking spiritual care from me, I would get questions for you. And these questions were not for you to answer to me. These were because that would also ensure that I'm not becoming your guru. You're taking these questions back and you're going to answer them on your own. And that was part of your homework, if you will. And you never had to come back to me for the answer to tell me what the answers were, unless you felt like they had some kind of relevance in your next steps and where we were working with your healing.
Oh, I love that.
So that's the way it manifests for me a lot of times now. And sometimes I'll actually have it in lives. I'll have it happen now in people, and I'll know the difference because of the way it just kind of shifts down. And that doesn't mean that I'm more gifted than anybody else. These gifts are available to everybody. Every one of us are connected to the divine in some mystical way, and it's all unique to each one of us. And if you don't know what it is, that's okay too. I would rather you not than you try to glob onto something and say, oh yeah, she's doing that really well. That's what I want. Because it just doesn't show up that way.
It doesn't. So, what's so cool is for you, like hearing you talk about it, I can feel in my body it's real, like because I can feel like the truth in what you're saying. So I don't look down on anyone who's ever said they've had the gifts of tongues, but I know that pressure was just not okay and kind of cuckoo.
Yep. It's not the way that is spiritual manipulation. It leads to religious trauma that happens so often. So thank you for taking, I love that we went down that road, but please ask your question, because I think our viewers and our listeners are enjoying this conversation.
I'm loving this because I didn't know we'd go here, but you said you could translate what other people were saying. Could you hear when someone was faking the gift of tongue? Like you could, was that just gibberish? Okay, I can't translate that, so they're making it up.
No, it was specific to people. So if there were several people, I could just hone in. My whole side of my face would just go red hot. And that would just come in as what they were saying. And a lot of times it didn't happen a ton, but it did happen enough that it was words from ancient, either their ancestors or someone's telling us about an experience and wanting to, I don't want to say caution us or threaten us, but to say, don't repeat these things that we did in the past. Move past these things. This still hurts my spirit, even on the other side of wherever they are. Please help humanity move on. Was the kind of the message. It was always something almost like a lamenting, wanting humanity to just keep moving forward was what would come out of that. And then some people I couldn't understand at all, and I never felt like, okay, they're not right. It was just someone's would just come at me, and they would usually be within 3 to 5 feet of where I was standing. So I don't know if proximity had anything to do with it.
That's so cool.
yeah. So it was an interesting experience. I'm glad I had it, because there have been people who said it's not real, and I can say it is real. And I compare it, like I always just bring in Elizabeth Gilbert, I bring in the Om mantra and what we know can happen, and other people who have been able to invoke these spiritual gifts that I do believe are available to us in different ways. But we have to be careful, because when they become something that is to abuse people, then it's something else. So you should always look at somebody's gifts with discernment. How are they using them? So Absolutely. I am so glad we went down this little rabbit hole, but I would love, rabbit hole. Yes, it is. Please get back to your story, because I did that little sidetrack, but I knew this was just something that needed to be discussed.
Yeah. Cause I hadn't thought about it for years, honestly. Well, another thing that was interesting in my church experience was, as I got older, since I was 5, I played the harp. And so as I got older, I thought, I would love to play. And my parents would always tell me, wouldn't it be wonderful? We'd be so proud of you if you could, lead worship or add your harp to worship. And I'd always want to do that. I'd always want to volunteer for different events at church, what would have you. And there was one mega church in Baton Rouge. I went to school at LSU, and I was away from my family, but I thought, I'm going to get connected at this church. And my parents were like, we're praying for you to get connected and focused again on church. And I really hadn't done anything that wild. I just wasn't going to church regularly. And they're like, we're praying for you. So I was like, okay, let me give this church a shot, because it was associated with the mega church back home in Lafayette. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm a volunteer. I tried different things, but I was like, okay, I would really love to play the harp. I'm in school for harp, and I have a harp I'm very blessed. This harp that I have is electric acoustic, and so many people in the world who play the harp most times aren't able to own their harp because they're very expensive. So I'm like, if I get to own my own harp, plus my family was able to get me a harp that can be plugged in like an electric guitar, I can make this thing sound like a Hillsong bass. Let's go, baby. And let's just say no one was interested in me bringing that to the table. And I was really sad about it. And I would try so hard to volunteer back home when I come home for the summers and say, well, can I lead my little sister, 7 years younger than me? Can I maybe lead her girls group, or, help lead, like co-lead, help set up the little tea parties or whatever they're having for these Bible studies. And I remember one of the leaders, who was probably about 4 years younger than me, asked me to come sit with her in her car. And it was while I was kind of waiting to hear back from them on their decision of if I could lead. And I remember we were in a pizza parking lot after we had just left the youth group after church pizza hangout. And it's so weird because I always grew up homeschooled. I was in college, but those moments, those after church moments, that was still like my joy and my socialization. It meant so much to me to be accepted by those groups, even though I was out of it, because I didn't get that validation when I was younger. So I was still like, yes, I'm in, like they're thinking about considering me. And she was like, come sit with me in the car. And she was like, Sophia, do you drink? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm in college. I have drinks with my friends sometimes. And she's like, yeah, but like, you can't lead if anyone could ever see you drinking in public. That's just not okay. I was like, well, I'm never going to be one to drink at home. I think that's a really bad habit for someone to get into, drinking alone. I was like, I don't, not, no offense to anyone who has a glass of wine at night, but like in college, it might not be the best idea for you to just have a drink while you study every day. So I'm not going to start that. I like to have a drink when I go out and have a pizza with friends. And she's like, well, you can't lead because one of these girls could see you having a drink and that could cause them to stumble. I'm like, they're 12. So that was really hard for me to accept because I knew in my heart, there's no way these girls don't also have drinks on occasion. Well, it turned out a year later, I found out from my little sister. I was like, oh, what are y'all doing tonight? And she's like, oh, me and this leader and this leader and this leader, we're all going have a game night and they really enjoy whiskey. So we're grabbing some whiskey and playing some board. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Yeah. So it like tore me up because I was like, it's not fair. This is not fair. Now, there might have been other reasons why they didn't want me there. Maybe my shorts were too short. I didn't look pure enough. But even that's a great reason to bring to the table too, right? I always felt in some way, shape, or form that I wasn't holy enough. And as my pastor as a child would say, that means set apart. You should look completely different from the world. And that example always sounded good and made me feel good when I could hear someone say set apart. But in reality, I just wanted to fit in too. I didn't want to have to change who I was. And I liked wearing my shorts. So I don't know if any of you listening have been through purity culture, but if you've been through that, you have to wear your shorts a certain length to be valued and to be seen as a woman who carries herself with dignity. And I always felt a little bit less than that.
So
That was my experience.
That's very interesting, and I think this is a good time to bring in. We're recording this right after the Matthew West controversy with his song "Modest is Hottest," and I believe pretty much it got wiped because the pushback was so hard against that song, where he was really talking about it in such a, I'll use the word disgusting way, using his daughter's young age and what he thought was purity. And I really took great issue with one thing that wasn't really brought up was the way he considered the broad spectrum was between dressing like Amish or looking like Kim Kardashian. And I felt like that was very insulting for both groups, first of all, and that he got to set what the middle was like.
And then saying, no offense, Cardi B.
Yeah, the whole
big offense.
Yeah, the whole thing was incredibly misogynistic. You going through now, my purity cultural experience wasn't as toxic as yours, but you going through it and knowing that you constantly felt broken, like somehow you weren't being accepted because of who you are, and you were questioning things about that. How did that song impact you in any way, or the fallout from it? What was your response to that song?
So thankfully, I think I've healed so much that wasn't a triggering factor for me. In fact, I saw a lot of other influencers who do what I do and speak out against what I speak out against on that topic. And I thought, well, I have a nice little booty picture from the beach I can add to this conversation. But I wasn't offended because I know that my job here on this earth right now is to essentially look at me and you and everyone else who's in our community as these little warriors. And we're building up an army to say, like, there was the Lord's Army song I sang as a kid. And then there's like hey, like God's in us army and we don't deal with this crap anymore. That's the army I'm in. And I just feel like there were so many people who had already said, yo, this isn't cool, shut it down so fast that's what I saw, the progress so quickly that I didn't have time to really get upset. And then he said there was something terrible about dancing if I catch you in a crop top dancing on the TikToks, help me God. And so I made a TikTok that was like, this is for you, me dancing on the TikTok with a crop top. Hope it causes you to stumble, because that's what I was always told my whole life. And that's what I do now. I dance on the TikTok in a crop top many times a day. And that's how I get a lot of my messages across, through humor. So honestly, I was grossed out by the song, but it wasn't shocking to me because that's how my dad talked to me every day. And that's something I've worked through and I'm able to share that now. And even this morning I had a woman reach out and say, "You're obviously not healed from all your issues and I don't understand why you just keep sharing things from your past. How can that be helpful?" And the whole point of sharing what we do is to show other people that they can use their voice to share their story and that I am still healing. Some of this stuff, it's taking humor to heal. And I'm building a community online, and it might as well be people who have gone through the same thing so we can heal together and we can be mirrors for each other. So I tend to use humor in that content. And uh, the Matthew West thing was just another way for me to explore that and to go back in my head and think, wow, how many times did I hear my dad bring someone into his office who had sons and say, "Oh, I hope your sons marry my daughters. They're all virgins. They're great girls." And they dress so wholesomely. They play the harp. I was the virgin Christian harpist. That was my identity for so long. And so just to hear a song like that is just another way for me to say, okay, is there anything left to process here?
That's wonderful. What a great healing story. And there's several things there. I know that you speak so openly about your past, but I also know
Mhm.
that I don't want to miss the part where you said that you and your family have, or your parents have worked through some of this, that you love your parents.
I
They were
do.
doing the best they could at the time, and they love you, which is also so important for our listeners to know.
Yeah. They do in their own way, and you know what? They're still not where I'm at, and they grew up with parents that didn't care at all what they did. And they've got themselves in very sticky situations. My dad grew up and was on drugs, and he had 3 children, I think, before he was like 22. So I have a lot of half sisters. So my dad had a life that wasn't full of integrity. I mean, I'm pretty sure he stole and he did a lot of drugs and he didn't have sexual integrity. And so instead of finding that balance, all he did was what he could do,
Mm,
what he knew to do. He was raising us through that pain. And it is gross for me to think about how could a dad like sexualize his daughters so much. But my story, thankfully, is different than a lot of women. I wasn't sexually abused by my parents. I had things said to me that are gross and always talking about my body and finding my value and my weight and my appearance. But other women have had ways that purity culture have hurt them so much more. Maybe they were assaulted and their parents told them it was their fault or their parents were the abuser. Thankfully, that's not a part of my story. But it still hurt. It still hurt and
yeah.
it still takes healing.
The other part of that you mentioned is the part where someone basically tried to deflect your story,
Mm,
and their goal was to force you to question what you were doing
yeah.
with your mission here, with your platform here. And it
Yeah.
sounds like you processed that beautifully, because I had a similar situation recently where someone said, well, because you're talking about it, it's clear that you're living in a spirit of offense.
Oh Lord.
That
I
was
love
said to
that
me
one.
so many times, and I have to believe, okay, this has to be somebody who went to my final church, because that was something that was the buzz phrase. But my reaction was to laugh instead of
Mm,
just being like, oh wait, what did I do wrong? What how am I going to have to contort myself now to try to get back into to their good graces? I
yeah.
looked at that as like, oh, well done. Someone's been indoctrinated into her belief system, but that has nothing to do with me. So I'm just going to let that go on right by me, but use it
Yeah.
as a teaching moment to say, all right, I'm going to grab that comment and we're going to talk about it, because someone else
Mm,
is going to get that thrown at them, where you're sharing your story because you know it
yeah.
has power. Your story has power and it's going to help someone. And speaking of that, since a couple of months ago, I had the honor of being interviewed by you for your podcast,
It was amazing.
The Enlightened podcast. So please make sure to check that out. But also, I saw so many changes in you from then and now,
Mm,
and how you were starting to another level of just peeling back the layers of who you are. Are you comfortable with sharing with us
yeah.
where you've landed
Mhm.
in your authenticity, and how Like I said, your story has power. And I think, especially for so many of us who are recovering from religious trauma, learning how to show up in our authenticity, I think people will be inspired by your story.
Oh, thank you. Well, I know that I broke a lot of anything that was left on me that was like chains to feeling scared to admit that I didn't care how other people saw me not interpret the Bible anymore. I'm not even making sense right now, but I
No,
hope
that made total
it did.
sense.
Okay.
It made total sense.
Yeah, I remember talking to you and someone sharing on the podcast that someone told me you need to read your Bible, and my response was I no longer give an F what it says. That's not to say that I do not respect the sacredness of that text, as well as many other beautiful spiritual texts. I will find something in it and I will think that is beautiful, but it's also been something that was used to hurt me and keep me down, as well as so many other people. And I don't think the Bible was ever meant to be translated 100% literally. And one of the ways that it has been since 1946 has been telling people that if you have any attraction to someone of the same sex, then you are a sinner and you're just same sex attracted. You're not gay. You're just same sex attracted, and that is a sin. And I grew up with hearing my parents say that and saying, oh, what a waste it is to see this handsome man on TV, but he's gay. What a waste. What a waste it is for a beautiful human to not have their body used by the opposite sex, but by the same sex. That's how it always came across to me. And ever since I was 5, I remember having the feelings, little butterflies towards women. So it was something that I just thought, well, everyone probably feels that. Like it's just normal. But then as I got older, I realized, oh, that's not normal. And I better not mention it because that's not accepted and that's a sin. So how can I stop feeling that? And I think I've always liked both men and women. So since I was little, I had interactions and crushes on little boys and little girls, and it was just normal. But I remember knowing that I could only share that I had a crush on a boy, and I could only make conversations about the crushes on the boys. But in reality, I had the crushes on the girls. And I don't know how my parents couldn't see it, because if anything, I know sexuality is this big spectrum. And if anything, I might be like 20% attracted to men. The rest is definitely like female leaning, and especially like very girly women. So I always had pictures. I have a type, obviously. Taylor Swift, thin blonde, Carrie Underwood, Doris Day, always on my walls since I was really little. And I even had Carrie Underwood birthday cake 2 years in a row. How embarrassing is that to say? I had her picture on my
Not
cake.
at all.
But most girls my age were having the boy bands on their cake and the boy bands on their wall. And my parents never had that conversation. They never questioned anything. They would just really hype up the guy crushes. And I think that in some ways, my bisexuality kept me, quote unquote, on the surface pure, because it was very easy, not easy, but I could divert that sexual attention away from just men and avoid kissing my boyfriend. It was just a little bit easier, because I think there's different types of attraction for different people. You could be really sexually attracted to one guy, but only have a friendship attraction with another guy. And so that first boyfriend, I was able to have that friendship attraction and only maybe a little romantic attraction and not sexual attraction, and avoid the sexual temptation.
Yes.
And I thought I was being such a good girl, but in reality, looking back, I'm like, you didn't want to kiss him. So that's my experience, where that bisexuality was actually a privilege. And I know for so many people, only a privilege to, quote unquote, stay pure and stay safe in that moment in my life. And for so many people, and in so many ways for me, my sexuality also made me unsafe, because it isn't safe in our religious communities always to say who we actually are. And for so long, I couldn't even say it out loud. I recently came out, I think 6 months ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so fun to say it out loud. I'm bisexual, I'm proud, and I've known since I was little. I just kept it to myself.
I think it was, you were processing that when we had
Yeah.
my interview with you, and to see how that then changed. I don't want to say changed, but evolved in your message, in
Mm,
your primarily your TikTok videos, and then, but also what you share on Instagram. So any of you who are
mm.
looking for someone who has stepped fully into their authenticity and celebrating who they are, you have to follow
Thank you.
Sophia, because I love, and you call it comedy, but I call it reality. What you're
Mhm.
sharing, yes, you put the spin, you are a master at taking a trending sound and
Thank
turned
you.
it into what it's applicable for your platform. And that's
Right.
such an important to understand what your niche is and who you're speaking to, and you're
Mm.
doing that
Thank you.
so beautifully. So also consider any digital coaching from her that you
Thank
might
you.
want, because she's doing that platform beautifully.
I do
But
love helping people make whatever they want out of their social media and help them grow their brand, whether that's through Reels or TikTok, Instagram, helping them with the podcast. But I will say, to talk about what you just said about coming out and really blossoming, part of that journey has been letting people know I really have no clue what I'm doing. This is all very new to me to say it out loud and to actually put myself out there. And I'm in an incredible relationship already, a non-traditional relationship with an older man, because we're 28 years apart. And I love him so much. And he's always known that I've been bisexual. And just so people listening who don't know much about bisexuality understand, me being bisexual and being at this season of my life non-monogamous, ethically non-monogamous, is actually more uncommon than just being bisexual and choosing one partner and going with that. Like, don't think bisexual people are promiscuous. In fact, even in my ethical non-monogamy right now, I've only been like dabbling with the idea of communicating with women. I don't really want a sexual relationship until I'm in a relationship. And my partner's known since day one. And we've been together for 2.5 years. And I've talked about this for 2.5 years and talked about our boundaries and respecting one another. So this is something we're exploring. It's all very new. And even though it's something that we're doing very intentionally, I still have no clue what I'm doing.
but sharing it openly, and I think that's so important. And I know that right now, talk about one of those drops of the spirit coming in, someone
Mm.
is feeling very uncomfortable about this conversation.
Oh,
And there, I want to invite whoever that is that's hearing this and hearing Sophia tell her story, is understand that our limited understanding about gender
mm.
fluidity is through the masculine lens of sexuality.
Yeah.
So where we are coming from, everything that we are as humanity has come through the lens of patriarchy. So
Yes.
of course, patriarchy is going to define traditional roles in sexuality, in religion, and all of that. So we don't even realize how much of that we are internalizing. So you
Yes.
see that when women reach out, they may judge your character, they may judge your clothing, they may judge your story. Because I bet you, the person who said to you, "Oh, you're telling your story because you're still hurt," was a woman. I'm
Yes.
guessing that was a woman, because we are brutal to other women, and the reason we are is because we are internalizing that misogyny.
Yeah.
And so I invite you now into this conversation, that our growth lives on the edges of our comfort zone.
Mm.
And this isn't an opportunity for you to judge anything that Sophia says, but it's an opportunity for you to see that it's invitation to start to walk in community with her,
Yeah.
seeing her as a human and as a reflection of humanity in its state, as it reflects nature, as her story reflects more about the science of nature than what our patriarchal definition of what
Mm.
traditional male female roles are. Gender fluidity is really our future.
Yeah,
Gender fluidity has always been here, but now we're giving space for it. And
absolutely.
that's how we are evolving. And so your 6 months and how you've changed, and to
Yeah.
even just go back and to see how your content has changed during that time, I just just bravo to you.
Thank
It's
you.
been wonderful to be so encouraged by
Thank you.
what you're doing and the space you're holding and the lives you are touching.
Thank you. I was asked by multiple people, kind of sideways comments, backhanded comments saying, is your content only going to be about being bisexual now? Is this all we're going to hear about? Is this it? And what people don't realize is, one, there's an algorithm that wants you to focus on your niches. So now that's become one of my niches: age gap content, spirituality content, and then now sexuality. And yeah, it is going to, but it's going to be because, one, my platform is my journal. It's an open book. So I no longer have to hide who I am. I find healing sharing it, because no one can start a rumor about me. No one can say, oh, do you know what she does in private? No one can
Yeah,
say that, because
exactly.
who I am in my house is who I am outside my doors. And that's something that I'm really proud of, because my whole life I felt like I always had to hide. And
Yes.
so I want to show other people it's safe to just be you. And even in the moments when it's not safe, you'll find a community that can hug you and make you feel safe. It is okay. And then to that person who you just felt very dropped in your spirit, like, okay, someone's listening and judging, I want them to know I was married for 1.5 years to a man. And during that time, I found this polyamorous couple on YouTube that lived in Austin. I can't even remember the channel name, but I just watched their videos and like their discussions about their relationship dynamics and their authenticity with each other, learning how to trust each other and like not have judgment. Very interesting relationship dynamics where it wasn't always sexual. It was just having all these connections with people and believing that abundant love is abundant, and you didn't have to be jealous if your partner talked to someone else. And it was such a new concept for me, but there was something that pulled me to watch it, but I thought I could never be like that. That's so weird. Like, oh God, that's like weird, but like I'd still want to watch. And I loved how authentic they were with each other, how they related to each other so beautifully and openly. And it's so weird to think that even though I'm not there yet on that level, and maybe I'll never get there, I might just have one long term girlfriend. I might just go through this like phase of like wanting that and then realize, okay, I'm bisexual, but I just want a monogamous relationship. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future, but I do know that in those moments of hearing about that for the first time, there were things that were really triggering. Well, that could never be me. And here I am today. So,
Oh, that's beautiful. And I'm so glad you brought one note that I had here was about your previous marriage and what
mm.
that taught you. So I'm glad you were able to bring that in. Now, as we bring this to a close, is there one thought, anything that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
Mm. I've been reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And one thing that I've been learning, whether that's dating new people or waiting on a business deal to come through or something in your life to level up, when you hear that thing coming in saying, I'm sorry I kept you waiting, or that person responding to a text and energetically like, oh, sorry they kept you waiting. One way to respond and to be happy and not live always in the future or in the past has been my way of being happy now. And that's just saying, well, I've been enjoying being with myself. And when you're okay with being with yourself and you're uncovering all the shadows that you've hid for so long due to religious trauma, that's just one other way you can actually enjoy being with who you truly are. And Eckhart Tolle says, don't worry, didn't make me wait. I was in joy with myself.
That's
I
beautiful.
was in joy with myself. And I feel like every layer I peel back every day, the more healing I do, the more I listen to podcasts like yours, Reverend Karla, I'm able to be in joy with myself because I'm not thinking of myself as a sin. I just really love myself and I see the divine in me and everyone else. So that helps you be more present if you can be in joy with yourself.
Well, amen to that.
Yeah.
This has been such a gift, and you are a gift. Tell
Thank you.
our listeners and our viewers how they can get a hold of you, how they can find your content.
Awesome. Well, I am on Instagram and TikTok. I think that's how we became friends, was
It is.
TikTok. And my platforms are always Sophia, Sophia Spallino, Spallino. And you can find my website, it's just sophiaspallino.com. There you can book a mentorship call with me if you're looking for guidance, whether that comes to getting training like one-on-one, like a Zoom call, private call, whether that's for TikTok training, Instagram, starting your own podcast, or you're looking for someone to just hold space for you as you go through personal transformation and hold you accountable to creating goals in your life for your own healing and your own personal development. That's what I do. And I'd love to work with you. So those are the ways.
We will.
Oh, and my podcast, Enlighten.
Yes, that's right. And that's at iTunes and Spotify, or?
Yeah, it's everywhere. And you can go to my website too. And there's a spot where you can listen to it anywhere. And I just started putting it on YouTube. So you can actually watch the episodes now, which is kind of cool.
Oh, great. And I'll be sure to put those links in the show notes as well so they can find you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm honored that you asked me to be on your show.
Oh my goodness. And I have a feeling you'll be back. All right, I'll close us out now. Okay, beloveds, I am so honored to be in this space with you. And it's been such a joy to be with this beautiful goddess, Sophia Spallino. And I pray you receive something, because I know I did. The teacher teaches what she needs to hear. And now, beloveds, go in peace and be at peace. Go in love, and may you be loved. Go and know that others are on this journey with you, and you are not alone. You are seen and deeply and unconditionally loved, just the way you are. Blessings on your week, and we will see you soon. Bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in to another uncut episode of Spirituality Matters. To submit questions to Rev Karla, email us at spiritualitymatters@revkarla.com. Follow at Rev Karla on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest for more spirituality teachings. Check out her blog posts at revkarla.com and sign up for email alerts while you're there so you don't miss a thing. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. Bye for now.